Hi, everybody. Today we're continuing 5.4, we're calling it 5.4b. We're going to look at even more disorders. Today we're going to look at depressive disorders, developmental disorders, and eating disorders. So here we go, 5.4, probably the biggest module in all of AP Psych. Depressive disorders. Well, you can probably guess what these are. They're characterized by persistent sadness, emptiness, and irritable mood accompanied by physical and cognitive changes. So your body feels weak or fatigued, and your thought patterns have become significantly negative. Lucky us, we only need to know we only need to know two depressive disorders here, major depressive disorder and persistent depressive disorder, and pretty easy to remember the difference. Major depressive disorder is what most people talk about when they say depression or I am depressed. MDD, major depressive disorder. Depression actually isn't a disorder. It's not the name of a disorder. Depression is either major depressive disorder or persistent depressive disorder. Major depressive disorder is the normal one that you usually think about. It's a pervasive and persistent low mood accompanied by low self-esteem and a loss of interest or pleasure in normally enjoyable activities, significantly impacting daily functioning. Again, in order to be classified as a disorder, it has to significantly impact daily functioning and cause distress and dysfunction. Major depressive disorder, depression, right? Persistent depressive disorder is basically just depression that lasts for over 2 years, right? So it's kind of the same as depression. It's just long-term depression, chronic depressed mood lasting for at least 2 years with symptoms that are less severe but longer lasting than those of major depression. So the symptoms, you're still depressed, but you're not as depressed as somebody with MDD. You're just a little bit depressed, and it's just lasting forever, lasts for more than 2 years. It's persistent depressive disorder. That's the difference between the two. Severe and short lasting, less severe, milder, and chronic. It lasts a long time, over 2 years. Right? It's continuous. It's not just related to one episode, like you lost a loved one, so you become depressed. It's MDD. But if life sucks in general and you're just depressed about everything and you've been depressed for more than 2 years, then it's persistent. That's the difference between the two depressive disorders that we have to know. Now there's bipolar disorders. There's a bunch of bipolar disorders, but we only need to know two of them, bipolar 1 disorder and bipolar 2 disorder. So bi means two, right? Bicycle. So bipolar occurs when somebody kind of fluctuates between moods. They get really low and they get really high, and they get really low and they get really high. Their mood goes up and down in unpredictable cycles. So bipolar disorders are characterized by alternating periods of mania, this is a very important vocab word, and depression, with bipolar cycling involving shifts between these mood states that can vary in duration and intensity. So somebody who is sometimes super excited and I might say crazy, and then the next day they get really down in the dumps and sad and depressed. Mania and depression, this cycle of up and down, is what's referred to as a bipolar disorder. So what's the difference between bipolar 1 and 2? Well, first, let's look at some vocab here. So this is what mania is. I'm sure you all know what depressive symptoms might be: fatigue, persistent sadness, difficulty concentrating, insomnia, or sleeping too much, sleeping too little, sleeping too much, suicidal thoughts, right? Everybody kind of knows what depression might be. Mania is something that might be new to you. So mania is an elevated, expansive, or irritable mood, increased energy or activity levels, a decreased need for sleep, more talkative than usual, or pressure to keep talking, racing thoughts, or a flight of ideas, increased goal-directed activity, or physical restlessness. So it's just this up and down that bipolar afflicts people with. So here's the difference between bipolar 1 and 2. We're going to start with 2. Let me start with 1. Let's start with 1. So bipolar 1 is what we usually think about when we think of bipolar disorder. Somebody gets super energetic and crazy, and then the next day they're super down in the dumps and sad and depressed. That's bipolar, this up and down. So bipolar 1 is characterized by at least one manic episode. This is mania. Mood is abnormally elevated, expansive, or irritable, which may be preceded or followed by a hypomanic or major depressive episodes. So you go up and then you have a major depressive episode. We already looked at the definition of depression. So that's bipolar 1. It's just a standard up and down procedure. You're manic and then you're depressed. You're manic and then you're depressed. Now, bipolar 2 is you still get the depression, but you don't get the full mania. You just get hypomanic. So you're just below the surface of absolutely crazy, absolutely high energy and intense. You're pretty high energy, you're pretty irritable, your mood is pretty elevated, but it's not completely nuts. That's hypomanic. So bipolar 2 is a less severe bipolar disorder than bipolar 1. Bipolar 1, fully manic, fully depressed. Bipolar 2, hypomanic, fully depressed. So you're just you go a little bit energetic, but not all the way. That's the difference between bipolar 1 and 2. And then we've got neurodevelopmental disorders. I believe the only two that we need are autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. So a neurodevelopmental disorder are a group of disorders. Here they are. There's a whole bunch of them that begin in the developmental period. So it starts when you are young. It starts with the changing and growing brain, and it's characterized by symptoms that affect behavior, learning, and development, focusing on whether behaviors are appropriate for the person's age or maturity level. So neurodevelopmental disorders develop in your brain, as your brain grows and changes from when you're a child. So we'll start with ADHD. So this is a popular one that everyone throws around. It seems like a lot of people these days think they have ADHD. So what is it? It's characterized by persistent patterns of inattention and or hyperactivity, impulsivity. So there's a difference here, and or. Could be inattention, could be hyperactivity that interfere with functioning or development, leading to difficulties in maintaining focus, controlling behavior, or staying organized. So here's the DSM-5 definition, and this is how you are diagnosed with ADHD. You need to qualify for one of these 6 symptoms to be classified as ADD. So this is known as ADD and this is known as ADHD because it's got hyperactivity, right? If you if if 6 of these things are true for you, you've got ADHD, or if 6 of these things are true for you, you've got ADHD. That's this again, the DSM-5. This is how American psychologists are going to diagnose a patient that thinks they have ADHD or they have trouble paying attention. The psychologist is going to ask them questions like this. Do you fail to give close attention to details? Do you make careless mistakes? Do you have difficulty sustaining attention? Uh, you don't seem to listen when spoken to directly, right? If you've got 6 of these, you've probably got ADHD. If 6 of these things are true, or if 6 of these things are true, or maybe both, right? Some people have trouble paying attention, and some people like they're low energy and can't pay attention, and some people are high energy and can't pay attention. They're hyperactive, hypoactive, hyperactive, ADHD. Then we got autism spectrum disorder, something that scientists and psychologists are still trying to wrap their heads around and understand better. Used to just be called autism, and now it's called autism spectrum disorder because it's a spectrum, meaning that not all autism looks the same, and it's probably one of the more unique disorders in that people with autism are all kind of very different from each other. It's not like, 2 people with ADHD or 2 depressed people, they've got the same exact symptoms. But autism spectrum disorder, you might have entirely different symptoms, right? So somebody with autism spectrum disorder has challenges in social communication and interaction, along with restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities varying widely in severity and impact on daily functioning. So maybe someone with autism loves to talk about dinosaurs or trains, and that's all they want to talk about, right? And maybe somebody else with autism just doesn't know how to make eye contact with people, or they have trouble knowing when it's their turn to talk. They have a difficult time in reading social scripts. So someone with autism spectrum disorder kind of just has a different software uploaded onto their brain. Their brain functions a little bit differently than other people. It doesn't mean that their brain functions in a worse way or a better way, but they just think about things differently. They might prefer routines. They might get frustrated when their routine is different than it usually is, right? If something changes, they might freak out, right? If the class starts a different way than they're used to, then they might have a little freak out, right? They want things orderly and predictable, right? Again, this is just one example of what someone with autism spectrum disorder might feel. All right, and then we're on to feeding and eating disorders. There's a whole bunch of feeding and eating disorders, but for the purpose of AP psychology, we just have to know 2 of them: anorexia and bulimia. Anorexia, bulimia. All right, so an eating disorder is characterized by an altered consumption or absorption of food leading to significant impairment in health or psychological functioning. So you've got an eating problem, you're eating too much or you're eating too little, and it's affecting your health and or it's affecting your psychology, your thoughts. Okay, so here's the difference. Anorexia is the one where people just don't eat. They starve themselves, right? So they think they're fat, even if they're not fat, and they stop eating or they eat too little and they just lose weight and get extremely dangerously skinny. Anorexia is a psychological disorder characterized by restricted food intake, an intense fear of gaining weight, and a distorted body image. So this is pretty common. It's you can probably guess this is much more common with women than it is with men. And it happens when somebody's like, I think I'm fat, so I'm gonna just starve myself and not eat a lot. All right, this can lead to all kinds of health problems. It's anorexia nervosa. The other eating disorder that you got to know is bulimia nervosa, characterized by recurrent episodes of binge eating, followed by inappropriate com compens compensatory 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 behaviors such as vomiting or excessive exercise. So this person doesn't starve themselves. They eat a lot and then they throw it up. So they eat a lot and then they feel bad and they throw it all up. Or they try to exercise and burn all the calories off really fast. They freak out and burn all the calories off. They eat a lot, freak out, burn all the calories off. Eat a lot, freak out, throw up. That's called bulimia nervosa, right? So it's similar to anorexia, but it's quite different. At least this person's eating, but then they freak out and it's bulimia nervosa. It causes significant physical and psychological distress. And that's a wrap for today. That is depressive disorders, bipolar disorders, neurodevelopmental disorders, and eating disorders. Hope you learned something, and I hope you have a wonderful day. See you next time.